Good afternoon. My name is Amy, and I'm going to very briefly talk to you about spending money on campus. So you've heard from pre-award, you've heard from contract and grant accounting, but now we're going to talk about actually spending money. So there are some things for you to remember. We do have regulations that have to be upheld, and many of them come from your funding agencies. Some of them also come from the state. So if you follow UNM policies and you follow the policies that are set out by your funding agency, you're going to be fine. But one of the things that purchasing will do for you is monitor your transactions to make sure that you're not spending money that is outside of those rules and regulations and could get you into trouble on an audit. So as with contract and grant accounting, I'm just going to talk about what's unallowable from the procurement world because it's a much shorter list than what's allowable. Most of these are also going to be covered by the other rules that you're following, but probably the one that is going to catch you up on this list is going to be contracting with firms that employ former UNM employees. So if somebody has been an employee of the University of New Mexico and has not been separated for at least 12 months, we're prohibited from doing business with them as an independent contractor. And there are occasionally exceptions to this rule depending on the situation, but it's definitely one where you're going to want to ask for permission first rather than ask for forgiveness afterwards. Because if we're unable to pay them, we're unable to pay them. And there's not a whole lot we can do about that. Tax exempt status. We are tax exempt for items of tangible property that are purchased within the state of New Mexico. If you have items delivered outside of the boundaries of the state of New Mexico, those are taxable, as are all services. But we're not going to pay sales tax on tangible property. So as we start talking about spending money, there are a few different tools that you'll be using to spend money. First, we have a purchase requisition that is submitted by your department to request that a purchase order be issued for you. The purchase order is the basic procurement contract between us and the vendor or the service provider, and that's issued by purchasing and then communicated directly to the supplier. We have a P-card program here at UNM that's very robust and very useful. I highly encourage you to have at least one P-card within your office. It's a visa that we issue to individuals to make small purchases without pre-approval, and then they're just reviewed after the fact. So we have a basic single purchase limit of $10,000 per transaction for goods and $5,000 per transaction for services. You can use it anywhere Visa is accepted. If you can't use your P-card because Visa is not accepted, we'll process that purchase for you within the purchasing department. We have lots of pre-negotiated price agreements that you can use either with P-card or on a purchase order. Feel free to check out our website to see if there's something that's already on contract. If you'd like to make a purchase of services or goods, there are some price limits that apply if there's not a pre-negotiated price agreement. Unallowable P-card purchases are slightly different than the unallowable purchases in general, but if you have a P-card, that's something that's communicated to you throughout that process of obtaining a P-card, and we also publish a list on the P-card website. P-card can be used for travel. It cannot be used for meals, but it can be used for airfare, lodging, conference registrations, etc. And now we're going to cover dollar limits. So we consider, and when I say we consider it because the state considers it. The state of New Mexico considers any purchase under $10,000 to be a small purchase, which means that not a whole lot of research is required to go into that purchase. If you're going to spend between $10,000 and $20,000, we need to have at least one quote. If you're spending between $20,000 and $60,000, we need 3 quotes to show some informal competition. Our formal bid limit or formal limit for competition is $60,000 in New Mexico. So if you'll be making a purchase, it's not one single item, it's the entire purchase that will exceed $60,000. If it does not already have a pre-negotiated price agreement, then we'll need to put that out for formal competition. There are many ways that we can initiate a formal competition process, but we use two more often than any other, and that's request for proposal, or RFP, and invitation for bid, or IFB. We use RFPs when we want to evaluate on more than just price, so maybe we want to look at samples and check references and maybe have a demonstration from the vendor. If we only care about price, we use an IFB, or an invitation for bid. We almost always care about more than just the price, so we're usually going to use an RFP process. Both RFPs and IFBs have to be advertised for at least 10 days for interested parties to respond, so notify us as soon as possible if you're going to have a large purchase, and that way we're not going to run out of time. There is something called a sole brand or a sole source that can take the place of the competition requirement. However, the state of New Mexico does require that sole source purchases be posted for at least 30 days on the Sunshine Portal before the purchase is made. So sometimes it's quicker to go out to bid than to put something up on a sole source. But that's something that we can discuss with you when you contact us about your purchasing requirement. If you're sure you have a sole source and 30 days is not a problem, we have forms on the purchasing website that you can download and fill out. And this is the bad news. There are some relatively new penalties in New Mexico for violation of the procurement code, which is part of our New Mexico state statutes. Willful violations now are either misdemeanors if they're under $60,000 or felonies if they're over $60,000. Now, a fourth-degree felony in New Mexico does carry the potential of jail time, but it has to be a willful violation, although that means action or inaction. If you send through your documents for approval through contract and grant accounting and through purchasing, then once we have signed off on your procurements, there's no chance that there could be a willful violation on your part. At that point, any violation is on the part of the procurement representative. So it's much safer to just ask if you're unsure, or go ahead and send the paperwork through. If you think you might need to send paperwork through, just send it. It's much easier for you. It's unlikely that this is going to be a problem to you unless your brother-in-law has a company and you want to spend $100,000 with that company because you want to give it to him, and you deliberately orchestrate a situation so that would happen. And that's it for me. I'm quick. Now we're going to talk with internal audit, I believe.